The Trump administration rescinds its freeze on federal grants and loans, and that comes after a judge temporarily blocked the order that paused trillions for federal programs, and it sparked mass confusion and concern, anger across the country. To break through some of that confusion, we want to talk with our 9 News legal analyst Whitney Traylor today. And I want to start with the question that I had at the top of mind when I was reading through all of this and trying to make sense of it.
Yeah.
Does a president even have the power to go in and change spending that Congress has already authorized?
Right.
Is that allowed?
Well, I don't think so, and I think we're going to find out as this thing plays out. And there's been so much that's happened in the last 24 hours that it's quite confusing. But no, this goes to the heart, and this is part of the separation of powers. And essentially, Congress, one of its powers is that it controls the purse. So it controls funding and it allocates funding. Then the White House, through the Office of Management and Budget, doles out the money. So no, they can't. The president, once that money has been allocated, the president can't just carte blanche do that. And that was actually something that President Nixon tried in 1974. And it was a very similar situation. He was trying to withhold money for these social programs, and it went to court. And the court said, no, you can't do that when it's been allocated. And that was when they were dealing with the sewage funding to go to sewage cleanup or whatever. And so the court said no, and then as a result, Congress passed the Impoundment Control Act of 1974, really codifying this. And so I think spending can be paused for 45 days, but under that act it says you can't do it carte blanche, you have to go on a case-by-case basis, and that is not at all what happened in this case.
Right, I mean, I'm curious who the plaintiffs were, because we never dove into that. It was happening so fast yesterday. Yeah. So the lawsuit was filed immediately. Who was that? What happened?
Right. It was a group of nonprofits that started it. And then since then, I think 12 states have joined in with their attorneys general. And essentially they said, look, they sought a temporary restraining order and a preliminary injunction to say, you can't just stop all funding and then require us to give you a memo saying what we're doing with the money and determine if it's consistent with the president's agenda. And so they filed the lawsuit to stop that block, in which the judge ultimately did. The judge entered the order temporarily pausing the block, saying, hey, you can't just do this carte blanche, and so that lawsuit is ongoing now.
And I am curious, because we know the Trump administration has certainly said they're going to figure out some way that they can cut spending and really dive into all of the programs being given out. But I'm just curious. I want to talk about what it means on a local level. Just a couple of days ago, I was on the phone with the Salvation Army of Colorado, and they were literally waiting on funding to come in from the federal government to start some of these programs that they have slated for 2025. They can't even get started, and if the funding is frozen, they can't do the work that they need to do.
Right. So to do it in this way, I mean, not only are there legal questions, but the practical aspect. I saw the report from Denver Health, who also had its funding, and by the morning they couldn't access it, and then I guess by the afternoon it was. And I know the White House press secretary said, look, we're not going to do this if it's money going directly to individuals like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. But that was not the case. There were a lot of delays and things like that. So no, this is what the concern is. And so they filed the lawsuit under what's called the Administrative Procedure Act, saying, look, this is, as an executive agency, you can't just do this. This is arbitrary and capricious. You have to have a specific basis. And really what the initial memo said was, the president has these 8 executive orders, and we're trying to really focus on foreign aid, DEI, woke gender ideology is what they called it literally in the executive order, and the Green New Deal, which isn't even a thing. That never even went through because the Democrats didn't vote on it. But the point is, they had these specific things that they wanted to target, but what they did was stop all federal funding. And so the court said no, and now it was they filed for a temporary restraining order, which the court granted. So they halted whatever the president can do. There's now a hearing for Monday, and the court can then extend the preliminary injunction so they can hold off whatever the president's trying to do. And I think the court will, until it's fully fleshed out and they can have a full trial on it. But just an hour or two ago, they rescinded. They essentially rescinded the memo, but then the White House said, we're still going forward with the freeze. So it is a complete contradiction. I feel sorry for these local, for all these nonprofits. I don't know what they're going to do because it's very confusing at this point.
Yeah, and then it trickles down to the people in our country, in our communities, in our neighborhoods that need the help.
Yes, and you're talking about veterans. You're talking
Right.
about Meals on Wheels. I mean, these are not part of any kind of woke agenda. These are people who are very much relying on it. And when you look at federal funding and federal financing, that is incredibly broad. The federal, I mean, that is a great source of income for so many people. So
It truly is,
Yeah.
and I feel like we'll be talking about this, and the president is moving at warp speed.
Yes.
So there'll be a lot to talk about, it seems like, with you. So we'll bring you back in here
All
next
right,
week.
sounds
Whitney
good.
Traylor, thank you as always.